All right, on today's episode of the Hoodie Chronicles podcast, we'll be talking Houston Texans football. They've been in the news recently, making some moves. They got David Montgomery from the Detroit Lions, and they recently sent Titus Howard to the Cleveland Browns to give them some much-needed offensive help. And I figured, who better to talk to than Cole Thompson, who is the managing editor at Texans Wire, as part of USA Today. So please join me. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy this one. All right, so thank you so much for coming on my show today. You know, we've been trying to do it for a couple of days, and I wish we would have done it a couple of days earlier because then we could have, spoke more about a few other things that happened. But before we get into all the Texans, you're an expert in many things, but this would be mainly focused on the Houston Texans. So just take me through your journey in the media. And I ask because our journeys are eerily similar. You do the podcast thing, I do the podcast thing. You've done radio work. I've had a radio show. Now I still work in radio and broadcasting as more of a consultant role. And, now you're a managing editor at Texans Wire. I'm a managing editor also at USA Today for the Touchdown Wire. So just take me through your journey and how it all came to be.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for having me. So I started out when I was a senior in high school, realizing that the football life was not going to be played much longer. I'm 5'7", 150 pounds. It's like, man, well, I'm not going to be able to walk onto a D1 school, and I'm not going D3 just to eventually have to force my parents to pay a little bit of extra money. So went to the University of Alabama and thought, what's the next best thing? Well, let's talk about football and write about football. So started writing for the University of Alabama's newspaper, got into that, did radio for all of my college career. And then here comes the big shocker. The job market was barren. Nobody wanted to hire you. Nobody wants to hire a fresh out of college kid that thinks that he's the know-it-all. So you have to find ways to stay active. And luckily, I got picked up by people at the Draft Wire back in 2016. And ever since, I've been back and forth between USA Today, SB Nation, a couple of other websites, and been able to cover multiple teams across the great state of Texas, also throughout the entire college football landscape. Went and moved to San Antonio, went and lived in Chicago for a little bit, finally moved back to Houston. And I have been now working, covering the Texans in some variety for the last 7 years at multiple outlets, including here at Texans Wire, taking over for the departed but never forgotten Mark Lane, who was a staple and one of the biggest names that I think ever worked for the Wire company and the impact that he had on all of us writers here. And I've also been able to dabble in podcasting and radio. And I always knew that this was the career path I want to go down. Luckily, I've been able to withstand all of the trials and tribulations that come with it. A lot of times people ask me, what's your secret about being able to be so hungry and active about going after this career? And it's honestly stay in the game, because you think that you're almost there and then you're nowhere near it. But the second that you get out, you are almost at the finish line. And that's what I always tell people, is that when you think that you're almost there, you're nowhere near where you want to be. But the second that you think that you're going to quit, if you really care about it, just know you're about ready to open the door to what's going to be a successful future.
I get a lot of that on LinkedIn. I get people asking me, how did you get into the business? How can you help me get into the business? And, I'm sure you get emails and things too, people asking about jobs with with USA Today and things like that all the time. But I will ask you, did you have a chance to go to the Greenbrier when the Texans had their training camp in West Virginia? Because I actually covered the Texans. I think it was 2015 to 2019. I covered them when they went there with the Saints. They had some joint practices and stuff, and that kind of got me in the door with the Texans and, back and forth to Houston a couple times. But did you have a chance to make it there at the Greenbrier in West Virginia?
Never went up there. I started covering the Texans in 2019. Right as soon as the season started. So when the Greenbrier happened, that was the very last time that I wasn't writing about the Texans. And then they went back in 2025, and I decided, you know what? I'd rather go to a couple of away games. So let's just go ahead and save that money instead of going to the Greenbrier for a week.
So just how many people, from, let's say 2019, are left with the Texans organization? Because I had the privilege of meeting a lot of their writers, a lot of people while I was at the Greenbrier. So how many people are left with them? Do they still have pretty much the same staff as far as journalists?
No, it's completely changed at this point. Now, there's a couple of people that still are basically they're Houston-based reporters. So someone like Christy Reekin for AP News, she covers all of Houston. So she's been the Houston beat reporter for 20 plus years, covering everyone from the Dom Capers era to what we have now in Houston. John McClain still is around. He's just no longer writing for the Chronicle. But besides that, almost everybody else has completely changed. I came on in 2019. ESPN's DJ Bieniemy came on in 2021. Jonathan M. Alexander, the Houston Chronicle, came on in 2020. The Athletic shut down their department for the vertical that was with the Texans at the time. Aaron Wilson is still writing. He just no longer is with the Houston Chronicle. He's now with KPRC2 News. So There's a few friendly faces that you would probably remember, but for the most part, it's been a slew of new writers that have come on through.
I do remember meeting John McClain. I think after that we followed each other on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. So I stayed in touch with him a good bit, but I always had a good time, talking to some of those people. And that's why I asked, maybe he was left. But when it comes to radio and podcasting and all that, which do you prefer? Because for me, I was in the radio world. We had our own show for a while. I was co-host, but it was the time we did it on Saturdays at 9 a.m. And I'm like, well, nobody's really going to get up and listen to a radio show Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. If anything, they're going to get ready for the day for college football and watch college game day. So that's why I kind of, branched out and started on my own thing with the podcast. This was my first podcast I had. This one is new that I just started a few months ago. But what do you prefer?
There's not really a favoritism. I think there's just an art of doing both, and the way that you do it is completely different. For me with radio, it's you got to make sure that you're focused in on so many of the facts and the details, and then you have the outlandish takes that are still pretty civil. You don't want to be ahead and be the screaming head into a microphone because then people just call you an idiot. But at the same time, you also want to be able to have opinions, and you want to be able to be vibrant and personable. And I think that's something that I've done a really good job of building a character with. But then with podcasting, I get to be more my natural self. I'm not time constrained. I can go ahead and go throw out ad reads when I need to. I don't have to be on a moving clock. I don't have to be worried about hitting certain points and de factos X, Y, and Z. And I kind of just get to go with the flow with it. With radio, you certainly want to go with the flow, and it's a lot easier working when you got a co-host. But I feel like that when you do podcasting, basically it's like more so just a conversation with yourself. And I feel like that with podcasting more than anything else, especially when you don't know what the audience is like, because when you do podcasting, the audience has to find you, and you have to find the best way to retain their attention. Where when you do radio, yeah, they can listen to you on the app or they can listen to you on replay, but it's live radio. So they got to find you when it's going live. They want to hear it in that direct moment. I think that the beauty is if I'm entertaining myself and I'm enjoying the conversation I'm having when looking into a camera and being able just to spew nonsensical stuff around college football and around the NFL, I think I'm doing my part right. So there's a different feel for both. Podcasting is ever growing, and it's always going to be, I think, now a new medium in the landscape. But I feel like that if you're able to master radio and you do a pretty good job of it, and you're able to get callers to consistently be a part of the show and be impactful, you're doing something right with that too. It's a dying art form, but it's an art form that I still appreciate.
So like I said, when I did the first podcast, it's really hard if you don't have a guest, just to sit and talk and keep everything going and not just say one breath, but just without having any kind of dead air. It's so difficult, to voice your opinion like that. But that's why I always enjoyed the radio thing, having a co-host, and you have your listeners you're always there for you. But that's why I just decided, which is your preference. But let's get into, I know you don't have a whole lot of time, so let's get into Houston Texans talk. So I wanted to bring you on, and, a couple of days ago, David Montgomery, they acquired him from the Detroit Lions, and they got rid of Titus Howard to the Cleveland Browns. So just tell me how those will impact the team, and if they plan on using David Montgomery as a workhorse type back, because honestly, I think, Nick Chubb, I don't know, I don't think he'll ever return to what he was in Cleveland. I think he's lost his step, and Woody Marks, I think as he goes on in his career, I love the way he runs the ball, but there's some instances where he needs to go down or get out of bounds, and he kind of reminds you like a Marion Barber who just looked for the contact. So do you think they'll use David Montgomery as a workhorse back?
Yeah, at this point, I'm pretty sure they're going to use David Montgomery as the workhorse. And well, they should. I mean, this is a guy that we talk about as he was the knuckles to the Sonic of Jahmyr Gibbs, but at the same time, I think that probably at least 15 other teams would have wanted him to be the lead back. When you look at the running back rooms that they currently had, a David Montgomery would be a massive upgrade over any single person that was in there. And so you have a guy that's coming off of what I believe a down season, not in terms of production, but in terms of rep counts, that now is going to get the opportunity to become that bruiser, become that physical back, become that guy that is impactful in ways that he always envisioned when he signed on the dotted line to become the next lead running back in Detroit. And the funny thing is, it's very similar to what happened with the Atlanta Falcons with Kirk Cousins, except they held on to Montgomery as long as possible. But they signed Kirk to be the starting quarterback and then said, hey, spoiler alert, no, we didn't. Michael Penix Jr. is actually here to go ahead and take over that role. It was that way when they signed Montgomery because they brought in Jahmyr Gibbs with the 12th overall pick. And it was kind of shocking at the time because everyone was like, we think that he can be a first-round player, but that's the running back you want to bring on in after signing David Montgomery. So I think a lot of people forget that because he's been splitting carries, the wear and tear on a 29-year-old is not going to be the same wear and tear that you see guys who are focal points for other teams. Even for guys who are 26 or 27, they're going to have a little bit more traction that they have to kind of go ahead and make up for. Well, you don't have to worry about that if you're a guy like David Montgomery, because if you were splitting carries with one of the premier running backs in the NFL. And I think that right now, the big reason why Houston was so adamant about going after a David Montgomery was, number one, they knew that the time with Joe Mixon was over. He just got released earlier today. They're going to save $8.5 million against the cap for him. You don't know if he's ever going to play again, for all we know. But at the same time, I think the other thing that's really important here is that you're getting a running back that's only going to cost you $6 million this season and $8.2 million next season. And I think that people are like, oh, well, Cole, why are you bringing up these numbers? Because when you look at what Kenneth Walker is going to get paid and what Rico Dowdle is going to get paid and what Travis Etienne is going to get paid and the other major issues that the Texans need to fix, getting a running back for $6 million of the caliber that is a David Montgomery is kind of a steal. So they're going to make him the workhorse back. I think Woody Marks is going to kind of take on over the former David Montgomery role when he was in Detroit. Both are really good out of the backfield, making catches. Both are very physical. They're not afraid of contact. I think the big area of strength right now that you're adding in for the Texans is they mightily struggled when they were inside the red zone last season. In fact, they didn't score their first red zone touchdown until the middle of week 4. I mean, they were 14 quarters in before they finally were able to put 6 points across the board from inside the 20. They got a running back that last season had, of his 11 touchdowns, 7 from within inside the 20. So this is a guy that is known for being physical in the critical moments and is not afraid to go ahead and lower the shoulder to get 6 points if need be. So that's a big win. And then the other thing is just they're going to restructure his contract to free up even a little bit more cap space to allow them to feel confident about the offensive line. With Titus Howard, there were 2 trains of thought here. The first one is that Titus Howard, for as good as he is as a player, and he's a very good offensive lineman. He's solid. He can play both the guard position and the right tackle position. But he wasn't great at either spot. He was a good player, not a great player. And when you consider going back in this fourth of this rocky turn of where do you fit into all these things, you kind of ask yourself, okay, what is the best course of action? Do we want to make him a guard or do we want to make him a tackle? Well, if they want to make him a guard, they were going to have to restructure his contract, and he probably was not going to get a new contract deal that was in place. And that, I think, was very frustrating. Titus, from what I was told, wanted a brand new deal. He wanted to become one of the higher paid offensive linemen. Texans weren't interested in getting that deal done, so therefore he goes off to Cleveland, and Cleveland sees enough in him to where they're going to give him a 3-year, $63 million deal to keep him around for the next 3 seasons. So it was a move that was shocking because he was probably your best offensive lineman last year, but it was one that I think many of us kind of expected to happen once you heard that if he doesn't get a new deal in play, all bets are off on what is his future.
So let's talk about CJ Stroud. You look up the Texans, and you see a lot of how far can the Texans go, or what's wrong with the Texans, or can the Texans do this and Texans do that? And a lot of people are like, well, the Houston Texans are the Houston Texans' biggest enemy, and they're only going to go as far as CJ Stroud. But it seems like a lot of people, has lost faith in CJ Stroud, not being able to replicate what he did early on in his career. But do you think this will be his last chance to actually do something, take the Houston Texans somewhere? And do you think the Texans they could have a QB problem?
Not yet. I think that right now we're prisoners of the moment. I recently saw an article today, and it actually, I nearly threw my computer as hard as I could against the wall because of how just idiotic people were. Saying that Malik Willis is a $100 million quarterback and a difference maker that is supposed to be able to take over games. And I'm like, Malik Willis fizzled out in Tennessee, and he played in 3 games with Green Bay, and you're saying $100 million? Like, really? He's a better quarterback than Kyler Murray? And if I think that Kyler Murray is a better quarterback than Malik Willis, then that has to be the threshold of names that are available right now. Do I feel like that CJ Stroud is better than them? And the answer is yes. I think that while he's no longer viewed as maybe that next elite passer, he still is, in my opinion, a top half quarterback that was just put in a really rocky situation. And part of it was on him, and part of it was on just the personal surroundings that were kind of equipped with him. One thing that I think gets overblown entirely is the offensive line. Because if you look at the sack totals and you say, well, they only gave up 23 sacks. Well, Josh, they only gave up 23 sacks because CJ Stroud realized that the pocket was collapsing and he got rid of the ball in a timely manner. He still was hit 4th most among all active quarterbacks this past season. So just because of you didn't finish the job did not mean he wasn't taking his fair share of licks after the ball left his hand. And so the offensive line was at such a low point in 2024 that we view every opportunity to say, oh, the offensive line wasn't the problem. No, the offensive line improved from being a sad sack of mediocrity to, okay, it's watchable now. That's not a winning formula for a quarterback that needs to be able to have time to throw. And so that was a big downfall. And the other part was you had a first-time play caller in Nick Caley coming on in to bring a new offensive identity to the table that was very intricate at times to learn. And when you were having a constant carousel on the offensive line of who's playing where this week, you could have misassignments, and it could lead to rush throws, and it could lead to turnovers, and it could lead to bad execution. I think that this year is the year to where CJ's got to put it all together, because we're talking about a guy that went from how much is he going to make this offseason on his brand new extension to he's got to worry about what's going to happen if they don't pick up his fifth-year option, which I do think that they will, but still, you're at that vicinity. You have a veteran. You have now a seasoned play caller who went through the lumps his first year. Your offensive line is going to be new, but the Texans are expected to be aggressive in adding in as many linemen as possible, including the draft. You still have one of the best wide receivers in the NFL in Nico Collins, a very good tight end in Dalton Schultz. The run game should be more progressive because if you don't have to worry about the Joe Mixon part of it all anymore, now you get David Montgomery, who's hopefully healthy. So add all this up together, and it should say, yeah, this is the year where we're finally going to watch as CJ takes that next jump. And if he doesn't, I think that you will at least have the awkward conversation of where are we drafting. But the problem is, Josh, right now the Texans are too good, and they're too good defensively. Like they had an underwhelming offense overall, and the number one defense that led to a 12-win season, which is the first time that they had a 12-win campaign since 2012. But the funny thing is they didn't even win the division. Like, they had 12 wins, and that still wasn't good enough to win the AFC South. So it's like there's still going to be a team that gets an 11, 12 next season, and that means that they're probably picking no earlier than 23, 24. You're not finding a franchise quarterback at 23, 24. So you got to ask yourself, what are some things that you got to go fix this offseason? I mean, in the offseason, or what do you have to be willing to trade on up to go feel like that you can move off of the quarterback? CJ is not a great quarterback in terms of, we put him in the conversation of Josh Allen's or Joe Burrow's or Lamar Jackson's. He's not that. But he still is, in my opinion, I would say a top half quarterback in the league when playing at his peak. Now we just got to see that peak be more continuous throughout the regular season.
So speaking of like Malik Willis, and I'm sure you and I agree, like the NFL is the what have you done for me lately league. Yes. And I get he had 3 games, and I get he struggled in Tennessee, and he came over and he played really well. But even some of the NFL veterans and, experts come out on these shows and say, well, I do think he's going to get a $100 million deal. So to me, that's just crazy. Kyler Murray wise, I think something tells me he could finally, maybe hang it up in the NFL and go play baseball. I don't know, because if you ever watched him play baseball, maybe that is the right path for him. But it's been, a long time in between. But as far as, like I said, CJ Stroud, you see all the negativity and things like that. But I do think this could be the last year for him to prove himself. And I don't know, next year's trade deadline, I don't know which path the team, may want to take as far as if he's struggling or not. But are there any other options that you foresee that, let's say, he is struggling at the trade deadline? Do you think a move could be made immediately, or do you think it would be something addressed in free agency or the draft? And I'll say too, I am jealous that you get to cover one team, because I've worked with Sports Illustrated and Athlon Sports covering Atlanta Falcons. I've been an Atlanta Falcons fan my whole life, but being a managing editor at Touchdown Wire, we have the whole, we got to cover the whole league. So you get to stay in the loop of things. And, the Falcons are talking about, well, let's bring in Joe Flacco for a while. I'm like, all right, let's pump the brakes for a minute. Yeah. We need more than that. But you see all the negativity and the hate for CJ Stroud. And people think that DeMeco Ryans is solely focused on the defense and doesn't necessarily care what goes on with the offense, which I think is crazy, because you're the head coach. Your main focus is winning, regardless how you get there. But that's why I asked your thoughts on CJ Stroud. He's going through so much.
Like, the second that you bench CJ Stroud, you're done with CJ Stroud. Like, I think
so too.
So the point is that you can't go from this like Tua conversation of we're going to go bench Tua to play Quinn Ewers, and then we're going to go back to Tua. The second that you bench CJ Stroud, you have to be waving the white flag and saying we can't win with 7.
Yes.
If that's going to be the case, then you're bringing in Davis Mills at least for the rest of the year. I think the plan afterwards is seeing where you are as a franchise with the record. Because if you're somewhere inside that top 12 range, and let's say you go 7-10 next year, and the defense was wasted and all these other things, Number one, I think that Nick Caserio will be fired. I don't see a way to where you can justifiably look at rebuilding the offensive line year in and year out, having a new offensive coordinator that comes from, surprise, surprise, John Carroll, just like you were from John Carroll, and think that you're not the culprit behind all of the miscues and mishaps that have happened with the offensive personnel. So if you're getting a brand new GM, he's probably going to want to bring in his own quarterback. The question then turns to, one, how really deep is this draft class? Because of every single year we say, well, wait till next year's quarterback draft class. And then, well, we go from 6 guys that are first round picks to 1 guaranteed number 1 overall pick. And, well, Ty Simpson is a starter, I guess. That's where we are now compared to where we were this time last year. So what's it going to be in 2027? Is it Arch Manning and a bunch of who know what's? Or is it Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, Julian Sain, Dante Moore? They all fit the bill. So if that's the case, then yeah, you can go ahead and maybe make the trade on up to guarantee you get one of the top 5 passers. And if not, then you go in the free agent path. But CJ, I think, is going to have a season to prove that all of the miscues and all of the underwhelmings were simply just learning a brand new offense with a makeshift offensive line with lackluster young wide receiver play from names not Nico Collins and a schedule that once again had its fair share of struggles. And the inclination of also being a little afraid to take a hit. The thing that I think a lot of people look at is what went wrong for CJ. And in my humble opinion, after he got hit by Taloa Hufanga of the Denver Broncos when he was trying to slide, I think that he started to do too much to avoid the hit as much as he possibly could. And he was overthinking and overcorrecting. Now, if the yips are still going to be a question mark next year, all bets are off. But if he's okay with understanding, I just have to take the hit and lose 9 yards rather than throw a pick 6 that could lead to the demise of our team, that's the smarter play. And if you get back to that version of CJ Stroud, I'm not saying that you are super confident and it's like, oh my God, it's amazing, but you'll take that as much as you possibly can.
So what's crazy is like I said, a lot of people focus on the defense, but you look at the offense. David Montgomery is a name that can only help CJ Stroud. He's a great blocking back, and then you look at that receiving core, and you're like, but they've got some weapons as long as they're all healthy. And that's like I covered the 2 rookies from last year that at Iowa State when they played against WU. You know, I covered WU on the side too, and I was there, and they're 2 special players too. But you look at that, you're like, man, they've got a lot of weapons. Like he's going to have some help, so we just got to get things right.
I think that you could see that probably with David Montgomery. I think that David Montgomery for sure is going to be a running back that is going to add in volume, and he's also going to add in that physicality when it comes to pass protection that will really help out as that secondary blocker. But Nick Caserio is going to be defined by how he handles this draft when it comes to finding offensive linemen. You're looking at a team that will once again go into a 4th offseason basically rebuilding its offensive line. And you can phrase it however you want of, oh, well, you let go Titus Howard, or you trade away Laramie Tunsil, or Ed Ingram, you decide to let walk. When you're rebuilding your offensive line consistently with a bunch of guys that are probably going on 1-year deals, it's not a way to live. So you're going to have to see Nick Caserio this year really buckle on down and not just draft offensive linemen, but draft the right offensive lineman that can be properly developed. He has swung and missed on almost every single lineman he has drafted since becoming the Texans GM. The only one that he somewhat have hit on is Ariante Ursary from last year. And we still technically don't know if he did or not because it's 1 year of sample size. But Kenyon Green was a pick that many people around the city both just looked and said, how the hell are you picking this guy at 15? Like, that's a 2nd round pick, and you have Tyler Linderbaum on the table, and he is a center. We need a center. You go after Juice Scruggs. Juice Scruggs, by many people's percentage, was a 5th or 6th round pick. You took him in round 2. I mean, there were people who were texting me afterwards that said, you got a better center prospect in Jarrett Patterson in round 5 than you did trading up to go get Juice Scruggs. And Patterson has not panned out either. So you look at the names that he's gone after and he's brought in. There's not a promising track record. But that has to change this year if you want to go ahead and bank on having a stable unit for the long term. Because if you want to be a team that can actually win, you need to be good in your trenches, and you need to be good with young up-and-coming players, not just guys you're bringing in on these 1-year prove-it deals or old former Pro Bowlers, all pros that are looking to end their career on a high note with a team that feels like it's able to win now. That's not a life that's sustainable. I think that that's going to really make or break what the Texans can be as an actual roster. Because I think that the offense will be fine. I think bringing in David Montgomery, you'll be good. But if you don't build a unit in free agency for the short term and then in the draft for the long term of the trench play, you are absolutely not going to survive as a GM or as a franchise, other than just being a playoff team that loses every year in the second weekend of Saturdays.
Well, we all know the defense is going to keep you in games. And now, as of yesterday evening, with them extending Danielle Hunter, and that dude is such a game wrecker and still has such a high ceiling, and it's an absolute delight watching him play. But are there other priorities too, as well as, I guess you could explain the 1-year deal that he got and why they haven't really wrapped him up long-term or longer than 1 year. And are names like Will Anderson Jr. and Jalen Petrie and Stingley Jr., are they made a priority too on the defense?
Well, Stingley and Petrie already got their extensions, so they're locked in for at least the next 2 years after this. Well, Stingley for the next 3 years. Will Anderson Jr. is going to get paid this offseason. Everyone I've spoken to around the building, everyone that I've spoken to that's in the know, they know he is going to be one of the most high-paid defensive players in the league in 2026 and beyond. So
as he should be.
That's happening. Azeez Al-Shaair is probably going to get another contract deal with at least a 1-year extension. That's more so to free up cap space, but still, they believe that he has earned the right as a captain. They need to address what they want to do long-term in terms of the safety position. And then the crazy part is, Josh, they really are going to be put in a conundrum next offseason, because the beauty about hitting on your defense is you get a number one defense. The negative about hitting is that eventually not everyone can get paid. And so you're going to have to decide pretty quickly, is Kamari Laster a player that we can live without? And if so, you got to pull a Trent McDuffie, and you have got to make a trade for the highest value as much as possible to guarantee that you can free up money to pay everyone else. Is Kalen Bullock replaceable, and can we get at least a day 2 pick in return for him, or even a day 1 pick in return for him? And if so, you have to have that awkward conversation. The same thing for Danielle Hunter, the same thing for Derek Stingley, even to that level, because not everyone can afford to get paid. But the defense, it's a priority to make sure that Will is paid, and it's a priority to make sure that everyone else around is also paid. But so far, they've done their due diligence with half of that. They just got to make sure they do it with one more.
So I've got a couple more, and I'll get you out of here. And I want to ask you, being around media, being around NFL, NBA, and a lot of players. I've been around Drew Brees, Steph Curry, J.J. Watt, and all those guys. And speaking of J.J. Watt, a lot of people ask, because they don't know etiquette, I guess, of being in the media. They'll be like, oh, did you get this guy's autograph? And I'm like, absolutely not. I don't want to lose my credentials. I would never do that. But I'll tell you one story. When the Texans were at the Greenbrier training camp, it was just, I was walking. I think I had been in maybe DeAndre Hopkins or Bill O'Brien or somebody's interview, and I was walking down past the goalpost, and nobody was around. And I took his rookie card with me that day. I had it in my pocket. I don't know why. I just did. And I was walking down the sidewalk, and he was standing talking to somebody by the goalpost. And prime opportunity. I mean, I could have, because he didn't know I was with the media. Nobody was around. I'm like, all right, this is my chance to get, have J.J. Watt sign this card. But I didn't have it in me to do it. But is there ever any instance like that where you're like, man, I wish I would have, done this or done that? But at the same time, you respect your credentials. You don't want to do the wrong thing. You don't want, you just don't want to do that. But has there ever been a time where you're like, man, I should have done that. I should have pulled the trigger?
Now, listen, it's the beauty about what we do. And it comes off as, it's not to come off as condescending. It isn't. But it's a privilege to be able to be inside of that locker room. And it's a privilege to be able to have a relationship with these players on a standing stage. And I know there was a lot of negative connotation that came out about new media versus old media when we had that Liam Cohen incident earlier this year. There is a finite level of professionalism that you have to carry yourself with. So unfortunately, it'd be really cool for me to be able to say, hey, I got my nephew an autograph from CJ Stroud. But the beauty about what I do is having a relationship with CJ is more so having a relationship. Think of it like you would having a family member that is famous. You don't want to go overstep your boundaries with them and then have them be like, hey, get that. Like, I can't trust you anymore. You simply just can't do that. So as much as I would really like to be able to say, hey, I did this for somebody, or I got somebody to help on out, it's just not in my repertoire. And it never will be. You were taught pretty early on, you're not a fan. You're a reporter. You have to be a reporter first. And it's okay if you want to be a fan. But there's also a time and place for that. And there's a reason why some of you are very lucky to be able to do this. And there's other people who there's a reason why you meet them out in fan events or publicized events where you can do these type of things. I'm lucky enough to be in the former spot.
And I'm the same way. I've been doing it for so long too. I've got players, numbers in my phone, talk to all kinds of players. Being starstruck, that never really happened, but we're way past that now. I'm there to do a job and to bring you a story or to bring you something going on. So like I said, we're well past that. But I've got one more for you that I ask everybody at the end of the interview. What is one thing that you want people to know about you that they may not?
Ooh, that's a damn good question.
A lot of people say that, and it gets everybody thinking every time.
I'm an open book. I'm honestly, I'm letting everybody know whatever the hell they want to know about me. I mean, like, that's just the way I am. I have no secrets to hide. I'm not that person who's not afraid to go speak his truth. And more specifically, I'm somebody that, is willing to go ahead and have a good conversation with you. You and I may disagree on a lot of different points, but my main rule in life has always been, I'm going to hear you out. You and I may not agree with each other, but unless you can't prove me wrong, you can't say I'm wrong. You have to be able to come out with a statement to show me where I'm wrong in terms of facts or numbers. Like, so, like I have this rule, like, the Mount Rushmore quarterbacks. Like, everyone's like, oh, I know who's the number 5 quarterback in the NFL. You don't. You have no idea who is. I think we can come to a conclusion that the top 4 quarterbacks are Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen. Pick number 5. Oh, it's Baker Mayfield. Great. It can be Baker Mayfield for you. Oh, it's Justin Herbert. Great. It's Justin Herbert for you. No. You're wrong for saying it's Jalen Hurts. No, I'm not. Because there really isn't that 5th guy who has separated themselves. That's always the way I am. Just out of respect. I'm always going to debate you, and I hope that you can prove me wrong, but you better come swinging, because I'm going to come swinging to make sure that I'm going to have the exact same amount of facts where you're wrong.
Cole, thank you so much. I'm glad we could do it today, and I'm sure we'll see each other in the Slack huddle in the editor's room over there. But I thank you for sitting down with me doing this.
Anytime, Josh. Take care.
Thank you so much.